Mic check 1 2. Yep, that's working. Okay. So we're checking out. Okay, good. We're broadcasting there. Broadcasting there. Let's test the chat real quick. Seems good. Okay. Welcome to the stream, everybody. We're going to check out the post-mortem of Darkest Dungeon. And I really enjoyed Darkest Dungeon. It was a grim, dark game. It's difficulties, off the charts, and you're supposed to expect your characters to die a lot. So the only thing that we're kind of skipping over is they show a video of somebody playing the game, and he's just like completely freaking out because he's emotionally engaged in the game. Then he throws his controller and stuff because he's pissed. So I just didn't want to hear all the yelling and stuff, but I keep myself a little bit more contained than that, but I can definitely understand the sentiment, most certainly. Got a bunch of things to do in the background. Swifty actually emailed me, so I'm gonna go check that email out like right now, and then I'll update you folks on what Swifty and I are gonna do. He just emailed me, so I don't even know what the contents of the email is or anything like that. I saw it while I was getting up this afternoon. I can't believe I keep sleeping in. So I'm trying to get my shit together, and there's a couple of things that I got to do, and then we're going to switch over to do some Stable Diffusion. So Stable Diffusion is it's a program that I can kind of run on my own graphics card, and we're going to see if we can't put this 4090 to actual work. Stable Diffusion to be able to generate images, morphing images, things like that. The first thing that I'm interested in seeing if it can do is if we can morph like Doom from 1993 and then morph that into like Doom 3 that came out like 2003 or 2004 and see what that looks like. So I want to see if I can use the AI stuff as a way to enhance the video editing. And then there's another program that Phoebus turned me on to. Speaking of Phoebus, let me post in Discord that we're live. And let's see here. My roommate does something. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so let's go here. Disney will probably delete this, my trilogy remake. What is this? We might have to check this out really quick. Fugnuk, send it over. Oh, this is from Star Wars Theory. Okay, Star Wars Theory is a good dude. He caught so much flack back when Disney was in the middle of releasing a bunch of Star Wars films. He wanted to like them so much, and then he kind of came to the conclusion that Disney wasn't putting as much effort in as Lucasfilms did back in the day. That's putting it as mildly as I can think. So let's check this out. I'm going to be working on stuff in the background. Say hi in the chat. We'll be checking this video out, and then the Darkest Dungeon will
fulfill your destiny. TheorySabers.com.
This series is a nonprofit made for fans by fans.
God.
Wait. Okay, so this is probably generated with AI.
The Empire is all but destroyed.
And then this has got to be...
And yet I feel no peace.
See, this has got... Somebody put on a glove, and they got this shot in front of a green screen, and then they put that in front of this that was probably generated with AI or something, or at least with a 3D program. So I can see... See, this is how you use AI. This is all. He's generated
Jeddah,
all this stuff with AI.
a dying moon. I've been
And
here
he's-
before.
He's put it together.
It was one of the
nicely.
first systems used to demonstrate the power of the Death Star. A single reactor blast to its holy city destabilized its core. For centuries, pilgrims came to Jeddah, drawn by the Force. The Empire wanted to erase faith with fire. Now, this world is fractured. The air is thin. And with each passing year, its surface, now filled with death and decay, breaks apart a little more. And yet, the Force remains.
Form 5 emphasizes strength and domination. You don't wait for an opening, you make one. But remember, the Jedi must choose when to strike. It's unwise to lower your defenses. Keep your eye on your opponent. Stay focused. Breathe.
Of how far he fell. He died in my arms. Not as Vader, but as my father. Ilum. It was here where the Jedi brought their younglings. A great trial. They came to seek their kyber crystals. The heart of every lightsaber.
Younglings! Younglings!
Perhaps someday, I will bring my own students here. Each piece tells a tale. Ruins lost to time. The Jedi were never perfect. With each world I learned not to rebuild what was, but to forge something new. The galaxy doesn't need legends. It needs teachers. Where hope once began, so will we.
Okay. Well, that was great. How much? This has already got 147 views, and he basically made a trailer that is like he's a super big Star Wars fan, obviously. So he basically made a trailer to the type of video that he wanted to see. That was like a continuation of the actual story instead of what Disney did with the sequel trilogy. Without going into it any more than that. Yeah, this is a Luke Skywalker movie I wanted to see for years, taking place after Return, where Luke goes on his own adventure, rediscovering the history of the Jedi and who his father once was. 5-minute video is a better representation of Star Wars universe than all 3 of the prequels. Yeah, see, this is why I want to make some Star Wars short film stuff. So this is a great little short film. Proper application of AI. All of this is AI generated, but it's done with a purpose, and it's done with a theme, right? This is not what I would consider AI slop. Yes, he used AI to generate the stuff, but he did it with, an overall project in mind, and it only builds to the composition that is this, short plot trailer film thing. It doesn't, he's just not making some stuff and then like the problem is people will use that I've observed anyway, is people will get AI to generate everything, right? It's clear that he wrote the script for this and thought of the storyboards. That's the visuals that go in front of you. He thought all of that ahead of time, and then he got AI to help him generate that. Not the other way around, where people will be like, get the AI to write the story and then everything else. So this is a proper use of them blending together. Let me post that we're going live. And then the good news is Swifty emailed me. He's just been super busy, and he says he'll give me a call as soon as he can, which is fine. I was super busy for like 8 years when I was working at that last place I was working at, so I get it. He says, we've been super busy. I'll add your number, give you a call, and I'm just going to tell him, no worries, man. Thanks for the update. I certainly understand being super busy. I just ported my number to Google Voice for it. So if for some reason I don't answer, just leave a message. Just leave a voicemail or text me, and I'll call you back as soon as possible. Okay, and then I need to do a test with Phoebus whenever he gets a chance, to make sure that the phone calls show up on my phone. I had to switch off of Verizon. Let's see here. Where is Google Voice? Voice, there we go. Yeah. Okay, here, let's put on the Darkest Dungeon thing. It looks like I'm setting my phone up.
So that's Ezekiel 3. He actually still likes us. And did play Darkest Dungeon after that, and has actually played it since. And so, yeah, that's nice. So he has gotten some more enjoyment out of the game. One of the things we set out to do with Darkest Dungeon that made it unique is trying to create emotional attachment. So I think we succeeded. Sometimes maybe not exactly in the ways that we planned. I mean, I wouldn't say that was like one of our design goals. But when we were coming up with the game idea, so Chris Brasso was originally his idea. Chris and I were friends, and we would get together and talk about working on games together. We'd worked at other studios in the past. And this one it had so much weight. Every time we would talk about it, we'd get excited. And the main thing is we're RPG fans, and there's so many great RPGs out there. I've been playing them my whole life, on and off the computer. And one of the things we were really conscious of is just that, we didn't want to just make an RPG because we love them. We wanted to make an RPG only if there was something maybe different or new that we could add that might make it stand out. And the real concept here is the idea of heroes are human. And Chris liked to say it's about the sword arm, not the sword. It's not how big your shoulder pads and giant glowing sword are. It's the human wielding it and how willing they are and able to fight. And so along with that, becomes the whole range of human emotion. So moments of despair, these uncomfortable decisions we're putting you in as the player, confronting you with loss and permanent consequences. But the real secret is we're not actually sadists. The moments of despair, they're only insofar as to create moments of triumph. Because what is an act of true heroism without the possibility of cowardice? And we felt like a lot of RPGs are all about heroism. You have one hit point, you're fighting the dragon, whatever, hang in there, oops, didn't go well, reload, try again. A little bit about my background, because it's relevant to what's next, is I've designed a bunch of games on and off the computer, and a bunch of different genres. I like to say every time I make a game I enjoy, I have to do penance and make a racing game, which I do not enjoy and am not particularly good at. But I think that diverse range of just non-collectible card games to weird hybrid action Stratacade games to turn-based really helped because Darkest Dungeon has a ton of systems in it. It's a small game made by a small team. When you look at something like The Witcher 3, it's kind of ridiculous for me to say there's this big scope to the game, but I think there was unexpected scope. The main pillars, I guess you could say, of the play experience are this town, exploration, combat, and camping. And we talked a lot up front about how much time should the player spend in each of these phases. Combat by far is, I think, combat and exploration together are the lion's share of your time. But that's not to minimize the importance of the time you spend in camping. Or some people spend an awful lot of time in town looking at their things and putting their guys into treatment. But generally, you're walking side to side through a hallway fighting things. Built around those four cores, though, are a ton of systems. And one of the challenges of the game was that a lot of these systems are innovations, I guess, which is not trying to say that always worked, but the affliction system, was the real hook of the game. That was something, it's like, how do we psychologically model these heroes? Meanwhile, the cost of entry making an RPG, you still have to do all the other things. Combat, leveling, quests, monsters, all these sorts of things. And so when you start layering in affliction system and torchlight, some innovations, it was a lot at times. So I think one thing that went well is that a lot of the systems are not particularly eloquent. Some of them certainly deserve a second pass, a third pass that maybe never got it, and some of them are outright clunky. But together, it all worked. And sometimes, I guess, I say it went well because it's just a great sigh of relief for me that some of this, it felt like at times that any one system that didn't do its job was just going to ruin the whole mix. Like you're over-seasoning the stew and then, it's too, I can't recover it now. But I think in this case, one of the things, I'm just most proud of in the game is just that it did all hang together, duct tape and baling wire and chewing gum and the whole bit, to support the goal of the game, which was this heroes are human. And part of that too, it's really important what we didn't do. For all those systems that that I just showed, there was a lot that we wanted to put in, and these are just a couple of them. Crafting, or the idea of a more meaningful upgrade system, a more meaningful gear or loot system. The characters have this armor and weapon progression. It's just linear progression. You can go from level 1 upgrade to level 5 in armor, level 1 to level 5 in weapon. You have 2 trinket slots, and of course we could have done a whole bunch more. We could have done paper doll, et cetera, but that would have taken away, especially with our team and with the budget that we had set out to make the game with. If I was spending time on that, I wouldn't have been spending time on the affliction system, and that would have been a mistake. Similarly, and this was led really strongly by Chris, the creative director, is our focus on emergent narrative meant that we weren't doing these other cost of entry RPG features like extensive dialogue trees, going into the Abbey, talking to the abbot before you commit treatment, like, hello, Mr. Abbot, what's new today? What rumors have you heard? None of that. The quests are not particularly in depth. They're kind of the equivalent of go get the 10 wolf pelts. And we really avoided heavy lore at every possible opportunity. And that was a creative choice, but all these also support kind of what we were trying to do. Your ancestor called you to the estate, and you need to go to the Weald and fight things, or the ruins. So it's very archetypal, but in doing so, that means you have to construct a lot of story in your head. And ultimately, what we wanted to do, what we're really after is the idea of kind of like these old roguelikes where you make your character and you go on these crazy adventures, and then you can string together this story of like, well, that time with all the slugs in level 10 was rough. I barely got out of that. Thank God I drank the random potion and polymorphed and got away. We wanted you to do that with the heroes. And so the more that we force-fed down your throat, that wouldn't have worked. So it was very important for us not to do things. Our design process also went well. Yeah, you're welcome. Chris, so, I'm the designer on the game, design director, but there's a lot to do with this game, and a lot of design, and a lot came from Chris and I working together very early. And this isn't always the role I've filled on every game. It's kind of funny, but in this game, it very much became this role of Chris, drawing all day long, and having time to think, because he can draw and think at the same time. I cannot spreadsheet and think about anything else at the same time. And so he'd just be spouting ideas, and well, okay, not always spouting. He carefully thought of something. And then, I kind of got into this role of like batting stuff back over the net. And then sometimes he'd really want to talk about it again, bat it back over the net, and I could sit with it and get comfortable where it might have gone. In fairness, also my role in the game was to wrangle all these things and then do the detail design. Like, okay, afflictions. Okay, how does that work? How are we doing stress? What triggers an affliction? What kind of things can they do in the affliction? But kind of managing that whole cloud of red stuff was at times just completely maddening, but also fun. And the creative direction of the game, having that established really strong up front, was what we needed to be able to resist that design feature creep. I mean, I think, I'm a designer, and we all make games, and it's really hard sometimes. You wake up and have a shower, and you think of this awesome thing you'd like to throw in, and maybe it goes into the game, and sometimes you got to resist the temptation. And then also don't want to minimize the rest of the team as coming up with great ideas, being there to like reject something that is really bad that just doesn't fly. And sometimes it was hard because you can't listen to all ideas from all places, but the rest of the team was really important, also of vetting and trying and all sorts of these things. So the affliction system is the hook of the game. And that's really what we call the whole system for your heroes being human and sometimes basically being a bunch of unruly toddlers. And that's built on events and situations. If you think about it, being an adventurer is a really terrible job. You might be running out of food. You're in search of this elusive gold. It's kind of like startup culture. You're in the dark, running out of light, and could die at any moment. And so there's these events and situations that lead to stress. And everyone loves to make fun of how you can read a book and it can just blow your mind in our game, but that's very Lovecraftian, to be fair. So stress builds on the heroes. Once it reaches 100, we have what's called a resolve check, and that's a test of their mettle. And that resolves one of two ways. If you're lucky, they become virtuous, like this courageous, but more often than not, they become afflicted. And then this manifests in their behaviors and their stat bonuses or penalties and narratively in the things they talk about. The inspiration for the affliction system was not games, really, although I'm about to show an image. It was more, human experience. That's fictional, dramatizations, movies, TV shows, etc., but also just life. Being a manager, we talk about a lot. Being in a relationship, without, all these things, your human experience, it's pretty easy to mine that for how we react to stress. And that's a really important point is Darkest Dungeon is not a game about mental health or mental illness. Darkest Dungeon is a game about the human response to stress, and those are very different things. So this is an image, I really like Band of Brothers Europe, obviously based on real events. And there's this character, Buck Compton, I think that's his name, played by this actor, Neil McDonough. And, this great, he's tall, he's handsome, he's tough. He's been on a bunch of missions. He's kind of just this gregarious, energetic guy that's holding the squad together in a way. And they're in the Battle of the Ardennes and getting shelled through the winter. And, he watches a shell land in a foxhole with a couple of his buddies, and they're just gone. It's like they're there 1 minute, the shell lands, they're gone. And there's this great scene where he just comes up and he just has the 1,000-yard stare, shell shock, takes off his helmet, and he's just done. That's it. His war is over. And I think that was really a moment that, in a way we wanted to capture. There's always game over, man. Hudson and his, he's the most boisterous. I love watching, especially extended cut. I think there was even more talking, him at the beginning just being total boisterous asshole. And then, of course, the minute things go to hell, he can't handle it. And Ripley is the one, civilian that shouldn't be able to handle it and is made of steel. But war games and things have done morale for a long time. And to some degree, what we were doing is bringing a morale system into an RPG. And so these aren't necessarily new ideas, it's just kind of maybe packaging them in a different way. The affliction system had 7 afflictions, 4 virtues. And one of the neat things is that we have 15 different character classes in the game, and we've got custom strings and multiple variants for every single class, every single affliction, virtue, every single act out they can do. That's one of the things we really invest a lot in and paying out. I think the game has about 70,000 words of text now. And that's funny for a loreless game with no dialogue trees. So it snuck up on us. And if you play the game, they say, it might be a little hard to see here, but here, the Hellions being masochistic is like, please cut me, I want this. Here, I think the Highwaymen's being abusive and basically berating his party members. And this is too hard to see, it's a little small. More of the same. Someone made some fan art which captures the feeling you get in the game a lot. If you can't read it, can you people hold your shit together and hit something for 5 minutes, please? That happens a lot. But so the important thing about the affliction system is it's really the hook of the game. I mean, you know, the game is universally lauded for a lot of things, but this is kind of always there, and if it didn't work, the whole game premise falls down. And it's built up of really pretty simple subsystems, and we purposefully obfuscate part of that. When your character is masochistic, we don't tell you what could happen. We don't tell you exactly what act-outs they might do or how they might, run to the front or reject healing. We want you to discover that through play. We don't want to have a tooltip, or as much as I love tooltips, Chris knows I love tooltips. Never met a tooltip I didn't love. But at the same point here, we don't want to show you everything. We want you to discover it. But it's really important that stress, we could not. And we thought about it. We toyed around with obfuscating stress. But then, we could have the characters talk as they're getting more stressed, like, hey, I'm getting stressed. But then you never really know where the breaking point is. And you can't make any tactical or strategic decisions of how far to press or what to do or when to, camp if you don't know. So it actually worked out really well to just make it like a health meter. We worried it would be a little boring, a little dry, but that certainly enhanced the game, certainly enhanced the systems. You know they're about to break. And that was really important. Affliction system also features the loss of agency, which I'll talk about a little more. Yeah, it worked. And I mean, that's why I say it's something that went well. And I think one of the biggest reinforcements to me that it worked was during early access, which we were in for roughly a year, we made very, very few changes to the affliction system. I mean, frighteningly few. We thought we would go back and we would add 1 million more act-outs and we would, double back on some things that were really rough. And, other than a little bit of tuning and maybe improving the flow of a few things, like I think now, like if they balk the heal, you go to heal them and they balk, we don't penalize you your turn. They don't get to heal, but you can still use that character. We made a couple changes like that, but in general, we didn't. And the reason we didn't is because the community was very clear of many other things that they didn't like. And I think that's important though. The squeaky wheel gets the grease a little bit because this was working. And I think it realized the potential of what the affliction system was supposed to do. As you've seen with the Ezekiel video, we successfully not only made your heroes afflicted, we made the game players afflicted. How many of you have rage quit Darkest Dungeon? I don't know if I should ask this. How many of you rage quit but came back and played again? Thank God. Okay. How many of you rage quit and are never going to play it again but still came to the talk anyway? Thank you for your honesty. What's that? Thank you. Thank you for the honesty. I have met people that are like, I like the game, I can never play it, I will never play it again. And, but it may help you a little bit in your hearts to know that we also made ourselves afflicted a lot. Through development, we developed a vernacular vocabulary for understanding how stress was impacting us, and actually you should try it on your teams. It works quite well. So, we would see that, hey, maybe don't talk to them today. They're really close to afflicted. Or, someone would send a nasty email and then, we'd get on the side. Don't worry, they're just abusive right now. They'll get over it. To put myself out there, my affliction is irrationality. As my stress builds and builds and builds, and then I become triggered, then I'll pick some really stupid thing to just panic about. And maybe, coffee, or I don't know what it is. Or make some small point about the game that I want to fight tooth and nail about that's completely meaningless. So that's me. A little bit about, this is just to show, this is what we call the trait library, which is, this is how the afflictions are actually hooked up. This isn't particularly sexy, but what you can see there, and these slides will be on the vault later, is like a series of buffs to the stats, and then situational act-outs is what we call them. Like, hey, there's this chance of, if it's your turn in combat and you're abusive, you might do this. Or, if it's a reaction act out, if someone tries to heal you and you're paranoid, you may reject it because you think they're trying to kill you. That kind of stuff. And this brings me to one of my favorite things, the Microsoft Excel. I think you were saying Ed Fries said hello, and Ed Fries, was head of Microsoft Games. I like to think of him because he worked on Excel. That's his best accomplishment. So anyway, Excel is my favorite thing. Excel is huge, and not Google Sheets, I will add. Google Sheets are for collaboration, I'll use it, but Excel is the thing. Excel, when you're a small team, you need to figure out ways to move faster. And one of these sheets is the monster library. There's 200 200 monster files or something, and that was really useful to automate that. And so, usually things made their way from Spritesheet into a JSON or Darkest, so it's not like we had the best pipeline ever, but the programmers were busy doing important things in making the game, but we had enough to get through. And so that's where I think the VBA exporters and things like this were so helpful, especially when you're a small team. So setting up these parametric equations so that you can decide all monsters in the whole game need a little more health, and you don't have to go through. And I'm a big fan of formulas, obviously. So a lot of that went well, but there's definitely some gaps where we're missing key exporters that I always thought we'd find time to make and never did. So there were still it became a little confusing working with programmers because we'd make a change for a new feature and then it'd be like, is this an exported file or a hand edited file? I don't know. I got to look through my 27,000 spreadsheets, and then so that sometimes led to problems. Something that went well is our bad design. So there's a few areas of bad design that I want to focus on. So loss of agency, that's one. So in other words, your characters do things that you don't want them to do. They pass their turns, they reject healing, they basically just make your life difficult. Yeah, in talking to my partner Chris, it does sound like maybe being a parent, and or owning a pet. And that's kind of what they are. And generally that's bad design, because you should get positive feedback for the actions you do, et cetera, et cetera. But it was very, very important for Darkest Dungeon that you were not in control. I mean, that's really just like a founding principle. And so even though we knew it'd frustrate the heck out of you sometimes, like in the Ezekiel video, it came to one of his character's turns, I think they passed, and then of course he lost had a party wipe. But this was necessity from the heroes are human idea. This made it a little hard sometimes because Darkest Dungeon has a lot of numbers and a lot of systems, and it's kind of a tactics, it's a turn-based combat game. And so how do you sometimes you're worried about balance, like, hey, this character has its DPS is undersized by 5% compared to the other characters, and then you have this system in the game that basically can just rob you of a turn entirely. And that was sometimes a hard balance to tread and to get people to expect. Because I think for some people, they genuinely enjoy Darkest Dungeon as just, it would be really cool if not for this affliction system that keeps getting in the way. Like it's a turn-based, neat turn-based combat, cool roguelike, whatever. And so that was hard sometimes to balance because ultimately there is all this kind of stuff that's taking control away from you. Our save system, so if you're familiar with the game, it saves all the time. Actions are permanent. There's no save scumming. I mean, you have to go through great lengths to do some save scumming. And so permanent consequences were what we were after. We want you at all moments to be like, should I go a little further, maybe get a little more treasure? Do I think I can make to the end of this quest even though these two characters are afflicted and this one is almost dead? And to do that, we needed this terrible save system that is just really, really mean. And it's exceptionally mean because in Ezekiel's video, he crashed out of the game, and I guess he calmed down the next day, came back to play, booted it up, and it had saved right before the hit that killed his characters, because he crashed out. But it had already rolled, and the action was fixed. So, he's like, okay, we're going to do this. He had to watch it happen again. So that wasn't intentional. I mean, we did not make a use case for you crashing your computer and out. 15 unbalanced hero classes. So we chose to do more heroes rather than less. And sometimes, the cost of that was balance, and attention to each individual hero. But it was a conscious choice because every hero you add to the game gives the ability for more party formations and, more interesting things. And we always thought of heroes as loot. Like when you go to the stagecoach, it should be exciting when you're waiting for a crusader and a crusader shows up. When you're waiting for a grave robber and a grave robber shows up. And it's funny to watch people tweet about this because, full disclosure, there's no crazy systems in that we detect what you want and then we don't give it to you or anything like that. But, some people are like, I'm 20 weeks in and I haven't seen a goddamn hellion. So yeah, let's just roll the dice. But it should be sort of exciting when you really desperately need another plague doctor to fit, because you lost one from your A team. You need to bring one back. And we made the conscious choice, though, of not to try to balance them all. This to varying degrees of success, but it wasn't just because it would be difficult. We actually wanted it to feel a little spiky, you know, like first edition D&D. Like, it's crazy. Monks and magic users are basically just like babies in radio flyers that you have to pull around for the first couple levels. And then, but then by the time they get to level 12, it's crazy. They're wiping out entire armies and that kind of stuff. And I think that spikiness is really fun. You know, sometimes there's this like crusade to balance the hell out of your game. And I think it really depends what you're trying to accomplish. If it's a multiplayer, it's Hearthstone, yes. If it's a single-player RPG where, you don't like Hellions or you don't like Highwaymen as much, it's not a critical issue. And we even had conflict in the team on this. I mean, there was times that people would kind of bring these things to me, and I'm just like, I'm really not worried by that problem right now. And I think it was hard for people to understand, but it was a conscious choice of, I'm worried about the affliction system right now, or I'm worried about something else, not the Highwaymen's DPS. And also, I think something that's forgotten is that characters are the sum of their entire usage throughout the game, in particular combat and camping. And so a lot of times, again, to reference DPS, we're like, this character's DPS is too low. Well, what about their camping skills? What about their versatility? What about their range of skills and where they can be positioned in the party and things like that? And there were plenty of times where a character was underpowered across the board, and not intentionally. And so we did, that early access was great for that. But I think a lot of times people look at the immediate usage of something and not kind of the entirety. Another thing that was really bad about what we did, but good, was everybody's favorite Lord and Savior, RNGesus. We have a lot of RNGesus in the game. A lot of variants. Intentionally so, which is not always great. But if you make all the right choices in Darkest Dungeon, you plan, you assemble a great team, you're experienced, you pick the right quest, et cetera, we want you still to get your ass kicked sometimes, basically. Now, I want to be clear, we don't have an AI director system, so similar to what I was talking about the stagecoach. We don't have something that detects you're doing well and then we swoop in and make it harder for you. We just rely on the beauty of RNGesus and variants. The Darkest Dungeon is poker. Everyone has bad beats in poker if you play poker, and oddly enough, everyone's bad beat story is exactly the same. It's just told differently. I was winning, I should have won, I didn't. And we want you to experience those in Darkest Dungeon. We don't want to, like the tuning part, the craftsmanship, the design is how often, right? How often do we want you to experience that 2/3 of the time? No, if you prepared and planned and took the right party group into the right dungeon and, provisioned appropriately and didn't, grab every bookcase in Iron Maiden if you didn't have the right stuff for it, you should do well. But every once in a while, things go badly. And we want to put you in that uncomfortable space of, I should be winning right now. This is getting away from me. Do I run? Do I abandon? Do I change my plan? Or do I hang in here and push through? And there's a couple, this can go a variety of different ways. Maybe you make that gut check and you hang in there and you win. And that should be a moment that you love the game. You should also applaud yourself for having the self-control to retreat and go back to town and lick your wounds. And I think that it's hard to communicate that, and that's why we put that first screen up when I showed you, like, Darkest Dungeon is about making the most of a bad situation. We're conditioned to play where you expect success, especially in the last few years with mobile games and things. You expect success, and it's really just a matter of solving the problem to get there. And if you don't have success, you reload and try again until you get there. And we fundamentally wanted to change that. And sometimes I think it's hard to communicate that to players, that they'll buy the game and then this will happen. It's just like, what have I gotten into? And the game is not intended for everyone, and that's something that I think went well, but it also caused.
Oh, hey, this shaver. Hey, thanks for subscribing with Prime. I just saw it pop up in the chat there. Happy to have you. I'm doing a bunch of work in the background. We're just checking out these videos for now, and then we'll do some gaming later on. I just gotta knock a couple of things out real quick, and then we can relax. But I got to do what I have to do before I can do what I want to do. So, thanks for hanging out.
Caused us a amount of grief as well. Another thing that on my role of just doing things that you shouldn't do, in our final boss. So I'm going to show a little bit from the final boss. So if you don't want to see it, cover your eyes. If you're still working your way through the game. And I'm posting not
죄송합니다. 죄송합니다.
Explain it.
Life, Father and Mother, Alpha and Omega.
아빠, 엄마, 알파에 내려가. Our create and our destroy. Build the heart of the world. 경솔했습니다. 경솔했고 어쨌든 딜은 시작하였습니다. Come on to your maker. 뭐? 뭐? 뭐하라고? 한 명을 골라야 돼? 아, 잠깐. 한 명 골라서 죽여야 된다고? 야이씨, 진짜.
So, yes, we did just completely kill a character that had raised to level 6 with no death's door, no nothing. We just took them away. You know, and by that time you probably put, I don't know, 10 hours in that character, maybe a little more, who knows. Hopefully it wasn't, well, actually if it was Reynald or Dismas, that's maybe all the more meaningful. The tutorial characters, of course. So yeah, that's a terrible design decision. Like, that's a rage-inducing thing. But we're so happy we did it. We couldn't be happier, actually. Anyway, there's a whole, I don't know if you got a chance to see Chris's talk yesterday on the creative direction of the game, but that was really important in paying off this cosmic horror and the overall narrative. And when that goes up on the vault, I encourage you to check that out, and he'll talk more about that battle. But
oh, thanks, Shaver. It's good to have somebody hanging out. I know it's I find these super interesting to have on in the background. It's just doing this live stream. It just kind of, in a way, it just helps me concentrate, I guess, because I'm trying to get this stuff done real quick, so then we can move on to the gaming or the video editing. In fact, as soon as I knock some of this stuff out, we're going to be trying to load up Stable Diffusion, and I want to see, it's a kind of an AI generated image generative program, and I want to see if I can use that to help with some video transitions. So the next music video I'm going to try to make is, so I made the Skyrim music video. I don't know if you saw that. It's on the YouTube channel. It should be the first thing that loads up if you go to my YouTube channel. There should be a link at the bottom. So I like making music videos like that. People seem to really like them too. So the next one I want to make is on Doom, and I want to see if I can use the AI generation to help morph between Doom versions. So there's like the 1993 Doom version, and it's all pixelated, and then there's like Doom 3 came out in like 2003, 2004, something like that. And I want to see if I can get it to morph from the 93 into Doom 3. I just want to see what it looks like. It could be some sort of awesome transition that you just can't get anywhere else. So we'll see.
we wanted you to experience that final battle in a specific way, and Darkest Dungeon has been about loss the whole time. And so yeah, we're a little cheap, and we make you remember that even more during the final battle. I'm going to kind of get a little faster through some of these so we can go through. Another thing that was pointed out very often to us about poor design here was healing versus damage. Healing it does not keep, like, the amount of healing, the numerical values do not keep pace with the amount of damage you receive. And you know, that was repeatedly reminded to us, and we're like, awesome, by design. So yeah, the quests are a battle of attrition. The longer you go, eventually your characters should die and become afflicted and stress out. And the whole game is about, can you get to the end of the quest before that happens? Or how much loss are you willing to stomach? If this is your favorite character, are you gonna, I think, what do they call it, gold breaking it or whatever, where, you know, people always want their guys fully healed, don't want to make any risk. So you could get 1/3 in a dungeon and be like, screw this, I'm out. Whereas other people are like, I'm willing to lose 2 heroes to get through this. Even Ezekiel, you know, when he lost that 3rd hero, he held it together pretty well. He knew he was trying to kill the Necromancer, and it was worth sacrificing characters. He only lost it when double death blowed at the end, which, to be fair, I think would do it to anybody. And so one of the things that works really well in the game is just breaking some rules. You know, the save one is the one I always come back to. The way I love to play games, I like permissive save systems. Who are you to tell me how I should and shouldn't save my game? But when we talked about Darkest Dungeon, we realized that would not work. It would rob the player of the experience that we intend them to have. And that was an interesting thing to be advocating and fighting for something that you don't even agree with normally. You agree with it for this game. And I think that's a really important point. You should never lose sight that you are designing for that game, not all games, or rules of thumb, or like, make sure you never do this. So break the rules. I'm gonna kind of hustle through this. Combat is interesting. We didn't end up at this exact orientation initially. We were gonna do kind of an Ultima style, top-down, maybe 2D. At least that's what I was really interested in at first. We were very inspired by this classic age. Bard's Tale, I think you can see the DNA. In the old Bard's Tale, it'd be like the first 4 characters can attack in melee. The next characters can attack in ranged. I think you see that in our system, and that the positional requirements in some classes are definitely more geared towards melee attacks than others. This is a little more the art side, but the Gold Box games, Pool Radiance, I know we talked about how effective it was. They just had an idle and an attack. You know, they sit there and then they just go, tick. And, I mean, not to undersell the amazing freaking art that these guys did, but we're not a game that's fully, animated with all these crazy keyframes. They made the most of kind of a light amount of assets, although a ton amount of work, I will add, before they kill me. They're eyeing me right now. It makes me nervous. We did a lot of visual prototyping. This is something that worked well working with Chris. This sometimes saved us having to like code things up or make things and try them. We would he would sketch stuff out. We would talk about the system, kind of mock up what it might look like, find the holes in that. And I think that was helpful. Here's an example of realizing, hey, not only with this new system and the slots, but we can have characters that are bigger. He was working out, what poses might be required, trying to figure out tool tips, which is, I think at one point you guys nicknamed me Tooltip or something, I don't know. And it ended up like this, and I think combat is something that has really served the game well. Probably one of the biggest unknowns of combat for me is will there be enough depth in this 1D system? And it was still something, honestly, I fought even up through the last dungeon, the Cove. It was starting to get like, okay, how many more like weird moves can I think of, or status effects, or ways to pay off this? But it held together, and I think there was definitely enough depth to pay it off. So that was good. And in particular, I think one subsystem of Death's Door that was effective was this, or of combat, excuse me, was Death's Door. And this didn't start in there. We were playing combat, and as you might imagine, without the Death's Door mechanic, so the Death's Door mechanic essentially means you can't be killed in one blow. So without Death's Door, you might be sitting at 2/3 health, someone gets a crit, your character's dead. And with permadeath, that's crazy. Like, you can never be safe. Even at full health, you can never be safe. And we didn't want it like that, because then that robs you of all the you're either tense all the time, or you're never tense because you're just like, we're all already dead, so what does it matter? So in this case, a damaging attack, the most it can do is reduce you to Death's Door, and then you have potentially a chance to heal or do something to that character, before they die. Now, you can still die, obviously, because sequences of events, you might not get a turn in between. Your hero may be afflicted. The character you're trying to heal may be afflicted, etc. You may have not brought healers. So, there's plenty of death, but this Death's Door, I think it's like, for such a simple system, it's been so effective in raising the tension. I love those moments where your character goes to Death's Door and you're nervous and you're confronted with the loss. Should I retreat? Should I try to heal? And that's worked out really well. Narration, is huge. We brought this narrator in for our announcement trailer. I don't think at that point we had even thought about using one in the game, but he was so amazing. Chris had found these Lovecraft audiobooks read by Wayne June. We contacted Wayne June, got him to read for our trailer, and it was just like, okay, he's in the game. We have to put him in the game. There's no way we can't. A little side tidbit is Red Hook is named after the story, Horror at Red Hook. So we're not in Brooklyn, which this could, I wish I would have thought of that before. People are like, oh, we're right next to each other. We're in Vancouver. But we just thought Red Hook sounded cool. It's kind of a classic story of like, power and corruption. Not maybe the best in terms of Lovecraft's cultural sensitivities. So in retrospect, we feel bad for naming it after that story, but Red Hook sounds cool, so. It's really, just this quote. The narrator has done so much, and by remarkability, I mean just virality of the game, people talking about it. at things like that, aside from its quality. And this happens all the time. It's crazy. We post a trailer, and it'll just be strings of comments of the narrator lines, or a Reddit post, or Twitch channels, and that's really fun to see. Even pop in places that aren't Darkest Dungeons. Someone will say one thing, and it'll just go. And audio as a whole worked really well. I mean, this is a design talk, but the reason I want to mention it is it reinforces the gameplay experience. If any of you do play racing games without the sound on, I don't understand you, because I think they're a lot more fun with the sound on. And it's not just enhancing the experience, it's enhancing the game design, which I'm grateful for. Narration here is just, this is where I started to block out where should he speak, what should he talk about, what kinds of things should he say, and just wanted to play a couple lines.
The human mind, fragile, like a robin's egg. There can be no hope in this hell. No hope at all. Grievous injury, palpable fear. More dust, more ashes, more disappointment.
On that note of disappointment, it's a good time to switch into the other side of the talk. On the narration side, I want to say, yeah, Wayne's awesome. Power Up mastered the lines and did the effects. Chris and I did writing. Chris did most of the writing, and some of the lines, are just really fun to see. And I think even recently someone's like, "Where's the trinkets and baubles line?" I haven't heard that in a while. We're like, I don't know. It's like a bug, but someone remembered the line so well they were very upset it wasn't playing. So I love just listening to it. And then I think for Gimme One Time, Power Up had Wayne record some other joke lines for each of us, and it was really fun. So yeah, he's got that voice that sticks out. But yes, disappointment. So how many of you are familiar with the the Great Corpse event? Okay, not that many. Okay. That's good. So we pushed this, during early access, we pushed this amazing patch called the Hound and Corpse, or Corpse and Hound, or I don't know. It had all kinds of awesome stuff. The Houndmaster, sanitarium features like new and awful diseases, Steam Cloud Save, which is kind of cool, but not as cool as diseases. Corpses in combat. See, we were so excited about it. It was even a bullet point. And this is going to be a little relevant here, but if you remember the end of The Dark Knight, where basically things start going poorly for Batman. Batman takes a lot of blame for some things. Leading up to the Corpse and Hound. So we launched early access on February 3rd of last year. And, it did, I mean, there's no two bones about it. It did far better than we thought it was going to do. We were launching into a climate of early access really being looked down upon. There had been some kind of high profile, maybe disappointments. And, there was even this whole early access was dead. Everyone likes to proclaim the death of the next thing. So early access is dead, and we're like, okay, we're about to launch. And we launched into that environment. I mean, we put our best foot forward. We delayed because in the fall, we originally wanted to launch early access. It wasn't ready. We delayed. Honestly, we were all running extremely thin on our personal runways. And, that we kind of had to launch there. We're like, all right. But we had no idea it was going to be received so well, to be honest. And I think you could ask, well, actually, Kier thought it was going to be received well. The rest of us were nervous as hell. A month later, my dad died. So I went from the highest high of my professional life, no question, to the lowest low of my personal life. I'm grateful he got to see the launch. I got to share with him how that was going. But when you're a small team, and any one discipline that is taken out of action, your whole team is derailed. I mean, everybody's not taken out of action, but how are you going to push a patch that incorporates all disciplines when one person is out of action? This is my dad in his natural environment. So we had planned this Fiends and Frenzy patch, which was our first, real big support update. And originally it was probably going to try to go in March or April, but that didn't happen. I was kind of out of commission for a while. And so we pushed it in May, and it was received pretty well, I think. And things have been just rolling, So the Corpse and Hound was really, though, our first time, because the Fiends and Frenzy had been pre-planned in a way, we knew what content, and aside from some gameplay tweaks, it was sort of preloaded. And the Corpse and Hound was the first chance to really, collect info from the community and step back and go, what game systems are not working, what's not working the way we want, what can we do? And one of the things, it technically wasn't in the Corpse and Hound, it came in Fiends and Frenzy, or around that time, was heart attacks. So what had happened is the players that were getting good at the game could do these dark runs. They would basically push their team to full affliction, and they realized that the afflictions were not incapacitating so far that your team couldn't function. And so they just stopped caring about stress or torchlight or anything, and they would just go run these people through. And that definitely wasn't the feeling we want with Darkest Dungeon. We want you always to feel in a precarious situation. And so the heart attack system came into play, which basically was at 100 you have your affliction check, and then that resolves, but stress continues to build. You have a little bit of a shock absorber there, but if you get to 200, and it's the smiley face, you're dead. No warning. It filled a very important gameplay role, a very important role in terms of what we were trying to get you to experience. And at the time, actually, there's a little bit of like, oh, this is a little rough, but not outcry. So then in the Corpse and Hound, we did corpses, which was very important too. So what you see here in this screen image is a corpse in the front there. And so there had been a dominant strategy, the table saw strategy, which is focus fire everything on the first enemy, take them out, and then that collapses everybody forward. And the enemies in back, generally they just like heroes had skill prerequisites. So if you're an archer in the back, you get collapsed forward, you can't use your attack. And so it was just too strong to focus fire in the front, and it kind of reduced the rest of our combat system to maybe irrelevance in terms of like positioning, ranged attacks, debuffs, buffs, etc. So the corpses, the way they work, you kill the enemy, they leave a corpse, it remains there, they hold their formation, they don't collapse forward, and the corpse will eventually go away, or you can spend some extra actions or resources to eliminate it. And this did a lot of things. It fixed the dominant strategy, it enhanced the systems that we had built, and we thought it did so thematically. We didn't implement it up to our usual standard, and that's partially for reasons I'll get to, in terms of like, usually we try to blow you away visually, and this was no fault of the artist. It was a gameplay experiment in a way, so every corpse looked the same. We didn't have custom corpses per enemy and things like that. And also, we had thought of a lot of other ideas, or at least I had, in terms of we could buff up the front rank melee enemies to generally be a lot tougher, these sorts of things. So it was better than the other design options. Oh yeah, well, I thought people were going to love it. They lost their minds. It's really hard to overstate how much they lost their minds. It's definitely, at least for me, but I think Chris would agree, it's the hardest thing we've had to deal with on the game. And we've had a lot of challenges on the game, and hardest probably just emotionally. It splintered our community, which had been big and growing and excited, and generally, really we had it very, very good. It was very positive. Everything had been received well generally, and people were kind of patiently waiting for us to plug some holes in the game. It created this changing wave of sentiment, and it was an easily told story, this promising game gone bad. That wasn't fun to look at Steam and look at the helpful reviews and see literally 4 pages of nothing but negative. This is a whole story in itself, but this also coincided with people that were not just unhappy that we had added this into the game, but that decided that we were basically the most terrible people on the face of the planet, and remain to believe that way today. And I think this narrative versus truth was hard for us, because what I mean by that is people who played the game and said, I don't like the corpses, awesome, we respect that opinion. People are like, I heard they ruined the game. It's like, well, where did you hear that from? That was tough, because we were also, still continuing to develop the game, and we have been excited by how well the game had been received. This patch launched in July, and I remember thinking, people are they're gonna grouse a little bit, it's a big change, but then they'll get used to it. And I was in Colorado, so my father had been cremated, and went back to Colorado, where we're from, to intern him and, be with family, etc. And, this is a few months later after he died. And I remember it was either the night before we were going to bury him or the night after. Chris calls me up, and we're having this talk, and he's like, it's getting really bad. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, they're not getting used to it. They're starting, the community is blowing up. It was a tough time. And this is one way to illustrate it. In July, we were really lucky to have a very popular website that serves a lot of gamers that are exactly the sort of gamers that we want to reach. They put us in this top 50 RPGs of all time. These are like games like Ultima are on there. And it was just a huge honor. They're like, this is the only early access game that's even on this list. And this was just like, yeah, it was hard to overstate our excitement of that. That was July, and we pushed the Corpse and Hound patch. This was August, from the same publication. So I'm fully afflicted at this point, for sure. Just pegged at like 190 stress. And we didn't have our death's door mechanic and the heart attack thing yet, so that was rough. And I kept hinging on these 3 words, a sad fate. I mean, when I read that, something just clicked in my head. It was just hard to even comprehend. Because we were still in early access. And we had been this example of an early access game done right. And now basically we were being left for dead on the roadside. Like they took this great game and they drove it into a concrete pillar. And I couldn't get over fate. Like we're still working on the game here. And this fundamentally changed my view of early access. I'm super pro early access for the record. I would happily do it again. I think we know more what to expect. But I thought early access would be a time to experiment with gameplay mechanics. And I don't know that that's really true. Especially if your game's already working, that's rough. If your game's not working, I think you have the onus, you need to improve it. But massive changes to people that have already bought your game, it's a thorny problem. It's even ethical. They paid for the game, now you're changing it. That's hard. So Chris and I spent a lot of time talking, a lot of Google Hangouts, some drinking, some pity parties, some anger, the full range of emotions. But what it always came down to is, did we do the right thing? And I remember just thinking okay, guys, just lay it on me. Just tell me, was this a horrible mistake? Because corpses were my idea, and I had sold it up through the team. Just tell me, I don't care, I'll eat crow, whatever it is. I just want to make the game right, And I was losing my ability to see objectively. So it was great because Chris and I spent a lot of time switching positions, devil's advocate, all these discussions about what to do. Meanwhile, we have this community management crisis. It's not like we have time to just do this calmly and, et cetera. And one thing that was also relevant is just the psychology of change. I mean, in other organizations, it's a whole field of study, change management. Some of you may be familiar. People don't like change. There's, who moved my cheese and all that. And not to throw
Hey there, Tina Tangle. Welcome back. I remember you. You were in the live stream the other day. I'm doing pretty good. What's your website for? It's still growing. It's basically a placeholder. I'll put a lot more. I just need to get more active and get some more content out there. I'm just basically using it as a showcase for all the different projects and things that I'm working on, and then hopefully generate some revenue. I did that cooking video, there's some Amazon affiliate links. So if somebody really liked the cooking video and really liked the way the chicken looked, that I made in the air fryer, they can click the link and go order an air fryer, and then you get like a little bit of a payout from that. Same thing with like computer parts. I haven't done it yet, but I've got like a drone over here and a 3D camera, and I was going to do like a product review of those things. And if I actually liked it, I'm only going to put stuff up there that I like or that I actually use. So if I use those and it turns out really well, then like I'll put a web page there. I'll make a separate web page, and it'll have basically like the product review and some links there, and like that's the idea. Showcase projects I'm working on, and have alternate stream, possible alternate streams of revenue. So you said you have a dope idea for the Twitch channel. I'm all ears.
A team member under the bus, but one thing that had been in my mind before we did this change is that combat had been working, and Chris and Pierre worked to add this combat camera, which is like, it fakes it to look like 3D. If you notice in the game, that it like sways to look like 3D. Anyway, I remember put in, and one of the guys on the team saw it and said, I think this is verbatim, "This is the worst fucking thing I've seen in my entire life." A week later, 2 weeks later, I was like, this is cool. So I thought that would happen with corpses. The long story short, and I got to hustle because I wanted to leave a little time for Q&A, is that we decided it was right for the game. It was the right mechanical decision. It was the right thematic decision. We stood by it. You know, that's, of course, a hard decision to make, and we respect the opinions of people that disagree. So we're in this weird dilemma of, do we remove this and make what we consider a worse game to make people happy? And this is something that got us through the next 6 months. I'm going to hurry through here, but, you know, Chris kept bringing it up. Like, things had gone so well for us, to be honest. It's like, at some point, you're going to make a mistake, or you're going to, you know, you have to fall off the peg. And this was hard. I mean, I say fast forward 6 months, but the last 6 months up till launching January was pretty rough. I mean, we're sitting here and going, is the final story on Darkest Dungeon going to be a promising game that was ruined? And living with that uncertainty, I think, is instructive, just because you'd think we'd be riding high on the early access success. No, we were riding high on, like, what's the legacy of the game, or running low on what's the legacy of the game going to be. Fast forward, I think an interesting part of change management is ultimately the changes were received well. And even people that had expressed concern in July when they reviewed the game, they're like, I see why they did this. And so that was good. What got us through is just holding to that creative vision and investing in more community management. I mean, these are things we did wrong. We didn't invest in community management up front. We were too precious about how to present the game to people and force our way of playing it down their throats, so we added toggle options. And I think that's something that we needed to do, and, you know, and we learned from this experience. And it also reminded us that DD, you know, we'd always said DD is not a game for everyone. And this reminded us that that was the case. So that's the key learning about early access. Content is always good. I think that, you know, substantive gameplay changes, you want to have community management in place. You want to warn them of the changes. We do this better now. Hey, this is coming down the line. Just beware of this. What do you think about this? We push it in a beta branch, let people try it out. And, you know, that was stuff we really learned. A few other things I'm going to skip through, and then this will leave just a couple minutes for questions. The bold points are what I want to emphasize. Other things, we have a lot of grind in the game. We didn't even add the in-game until full launch, and so we didn't get the benefit of tuning that through early access, so we're doing that tuning now. And, you know, certainly I think one of the things we've been repeatedly dinged on is this grind. We like a consequence, but losing your full level 6 heroes and having to rebuild, it just causes some people to just throw the game away. We don't want that, so we've been doing some things to help with those. Exploration was a really tough design mechanic. I still believe like we haven't totally paid off. You know, the walking and the quests and the curios. In particular, the game started, it was this auto walk. They kind of walk down the hall and then things happen. It was terrible. And we almost were going to restructure all of exploration. When we made it active, it just made it so much better. So that was something that we spent a lot of time spinning our wheels on. Everybody's favorite mechanic, hunger. It's not that we can't improve it, it's just that we're, you know, it did enough, and after the corpse thing, quite frankly, we're like, if we make a hunger system and it's worse, oh man. The jostled free, we had these events where you'd, everyone loves jostled free, where we had these events where you'd be walking down like kind of pull an event card and something would happen. One of them was this jostled free. It's like, hey, you're walking down the hallway and something falls out of your pack. And it just, can you imagine the rage? It's just like, your nice trinket just, literally we just took it away randomly. And so this was really good because it brought up what we call the jostled free rule. Is, you know, we do a lot to you, but don't arbitrarily with no, you know. Another way of saying it is this. Yeah, never fully, you know, it's like go get the 20 wolf pelts. There was a lot of stuff that we could have done. I'm going to skip right through here because I want to have a couple minutes for questions. Sorry. In the end, fortunately, the dungeon isn't too dark. Here's some of the stuff. I want to say about retention. We didn't design with retention in mind, but the interesting thing about it is just that it's a sign of do people come back and play more? And that's important to us. When you played it and started it, do you come back the next day because you want to play again? And that, you know, mobile, PC, whatever, that's hugely important. More than all those things is we feel like we made the game we set out to make, and that feels good. We were ready to live or die by that vision, and I'm really, you know, we're incredibly grateful that people have enjoyed it. A little bit about what's coming. We're not done. We're still pushing some features. We're coming to other platforms. We're going to enable modders, stuff like that. And this is news to even the Red Hook team. Today, I'm happy to announce game number 2 from Red Hook Studios. Brightest Kittens. All right, we got a couple minutes for questions, and then afterwards, you know, we'll move out. We'll probably get kicked out in a minute. We have 5 minutes. Okay, great.
What time period does the game take place in?
We narrowly refined the time period to roughly 500 AD to 900 or 1800 AD. No, it really is. I mean, you've got the Hellion, which is kind of almost a Pictish, a barbarian, on up to the highwayman with his, little scarf and pistols, and yeah, that's kind of part of our lore. Is we wanted it, or the Crusader and his heavy metal armor, on the way up to the Musketeer. So yeah, we purposefully kind of have created this alternate universe that isn't super defined there.
Can you speak to the level clamping that was done, where the high-level characters are no longer able to go on the low-level journeys, and what reinforced that decision?
Yeah, sure. So what he's talking about is basically we as your characters level up, we prevent you from taking them on lower-level quests and power leveling your younger heroes. It's not super popular all the time, but the bottom line is, if you can do that, the game is robbed of its tension. And this is kind of like maybe something that isn't incredibly eloquent from a design perspective. We're kind of hitting you on the head with a hammer, but it was absolutely critical to make sure that we keep you in this risk thing. So we loosely justify it and say, as they level up, they get big heads, and they're like, I don't want to waste my time down in your, you're the FNGs. You guys go on your mission. I'm sticking with the experienced guys. I think even Band of Brothers had kind of a cool thing like that, where they're like, as they progress, they're just like, the new recruits would come and they're like, don't talk to them, they're new. If they've lived through a couple missions, then we'll talk to them. But we're not able to express that. So, but it's ultimately because we want you in a position of risk in the game. And if we let you do it, you can just grind your way through the game and actually not be tense. And then we'd rather have you have fun and be tense than succeed and not be tense. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for the talk. It was really great. I'm not sure, for what it's worth, I think you made the right call. I think the game that you wanted to make, all your decisions to go towards that, and the community will probably get used to it eventually. As far as the question, you mentioned that when you were in early access, a lot of the stuff that you changed obviously was on the corpse stuff. What was some other stuff that you changed during early access, and did any of it surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of hero changes based on feedback. A lot of stuff we had planned out. We knew we were going to make the new dungeons, things like that. I mean, I think one thing we changed in the sanitarium was we split treatment into diseases and quirks. We allowed the ability to lock quirks in, and also if some negative quirks could become permanent, and then those would cost more to unlock. So I think that was really necessary to pay off that system more, and that that wasn't something we knew exactly up front. I'm trying to think of some other things. More mechanics. Every hero that we tried to put in, we tried to usually do a new mechanic. I mean, the Houndmaster had his pet and the dog treats. The Man-at-Arms had the riposte. And so that was really fun and also challenging, because every time we added a new mechanic, we're like, oh man, I wish we could retrofit this through the whole game. And we weren't always able to do that. I think it's one reason that a lot of people like the Cove monsters the best mechanically, because they came the latest, and we were able to make full use of all the whole palette at that point.
So oftentimes in design, you run into situations where parts of the game feel like they're fighting themselves. For instance, you talk a lot about creating the human connection with the units. But then also, because you get such a large supply of them, it's almost better as a player to not connect with them, so you don't get all tilted when they die. Similarly, you talked a lot about how you put so much effort and work into the affliction system, where the players spend most of their time trying to avoid afflictions. Mm-hmm. They spend a lot of the time trying to avoid stress altogether. Yeah. So how do you kind of deal with that as a designer, figuring out where to kind of draw the line of what's helping and what's hurting?
Some of it we intentionally don't totally draw a line. The hero one, for example, and Chris talked about this a little bit yesterday in his talk, but people play the game differently. So some people get very, very attached. They name their heroes. We encourage you to name your heroes after your friends and loved ones. And then when they die, you lose your mind. That's awesome. We love that. And then some people become very jaded, and they look at them as meat bags that are basically means to an end. And they don't even name them, or they name them Crusader 2, Crusader 3. Or sometimes, a little bit Baldwin 1, Baldwin 2. So they had a name originally, and then they keep his lineage up. But a lot of people post, I love reading these posts. They'll say, this game, I had these heroes, they're dead. I hate it. What am I doing wrong? I'm terrible at the game. And then people will say, okay, you're thinking this all wrong. You need to look at these. You need to just go in there. You need to run them to their deaths until you get some money, dismiss them, pick a few select heroes to really invest in, let the other ones just, And I love that interplay. There's no right way to do it. So there we let that kind of take care of itself. As far as like the affliction system, yeah, that's hard because we want you to be afflicted. So the way that's a balance issue, that if I watch, streams or get a lot of feedback that, man, people are just going through and they never get afflicted, I'm like, all right, that's a problem. We need to increase stress damage. I want people to get afflicted. And so that's a game balance issue.
Hi.
Hi.
So speaking of naming characters after your family, you mentioned high-level characters dying and that being a really big turnoff. I know the same thing happens in games like XCOM.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you didn't think you would be able to fix, or was it something that reinforced that hopelessness motif? And in a perfect world, would you add something that would help making getting your feet back?
Yes, so we just did actually. We just pushed something to help get your feedback last week. So now we have in the Stagecoach, there's an upgrade tree that allows you to unlock the ability to hire higher level heroes. And so that's really important. And then what else? We increased the power leveling benefit from heroes that have been to the Darkest Dungeon, come back and have the Never Again trait. And so I would say that originally we wanted that sense of loss, but 1 minute left. We wanted that sense of loss, but really getting wiped on a full level 6, no, that's too much. It's too much if someone literally walks away and doesn't play the game again. Right. We want you to be angry for a night and then come back tomorrow and be victorious. And so I think we just kind of had to think of how to do that. And, we're losing a level 2 hero is no big deal. Losing 4 level 6s is a big deal. So yeah, we're actively trying to improve that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question, I think.
When should a game go early access?
When it's ready. My advice is wait as long as you can, because early access, we've now had a number of successes. There's been lots of good games in early access as well, and I think that people will always be receptive to more good early access games, but they will very quickly jump on games that are not fun, not buggy yet. So you really have to make those hard choices of, is this game ready for prime time? I think a game that fundamentally has its loop in place and is fun, but maybe out of balance and missing some content, that's where, if we do our next game, I think when we know it's fun, we don't know about the balance, and it's maybe, 50% content complete, that might be a good time to launch. I think if you're let's throw it out there and see where it lands, I would do your own sort of private playtesting first, because it's really hard to come back from the perception that it's a bad game. All right, we'll sneak the last one.
Who's on your A team?
I don't play this game. It's too stressful. Thank you very much. Please fill out your reviews. When you get the email, it'd be great to know, and maybe they'll invite me back again after Brightest Kittens.
Okay. I'm just signing up for a bunch of stuff in the background. Trying to anyway. I keep getting blocked by, I get a security error when I try to submit a support ticket, so I don't think I'm going to be able to use this website or this service. I guess I'm just going to have to move on. Let's see here. We already watched that. I'm just going to keep on keeping on. Classic game, post-mortem Fallout. Let's check this out.
The pants kind of development. So in this post-mortem, I've divided it up into several sections. If there's a takeaway I want you to have, though, it's that the team I worked with was absolutely amazing. And I'll talk about them as I go through the post-mortem, and I'm going to try to call out individual accomplishments that people did. I tried to remember who worked on what feature and who thought of what cool idea that made it into the game, and even a few that didn't. But it has been 18 years, so I may not remember all of them, and I know some people who worked on it are in the audience, and they're going to keep me honest. The first thing I want to do, because it's a common question I get asked, is what influences were there on the game? Why did we end up making Fallout the way we did? I'll talk about books and games and movies that we really like. I'm going to talk about challenges. The theme of this talk was almost the game that was almost never made. It was almost canceled twice, one of which you may have heard about, one of which you almost certainly didn't. It was just a very rocky road to get this game produced. And finally, I'm going to try to, if I have time, I'll talk about the legacy, some features I see in games now that were not common at all when Fallout was made. So let me start with influences. I broke those up into computer games, paper and pencil and board games, books, and movies. We were a very media spongy group. People every day would talk about, I just saw this movie or I just read this book. And we're not even talking recent ones. I have stuff going back to the 50s that people would come in and go, I just found this book in a used bookstore. We've got to put a town in based on this book. So the computer games, XCOM, and if you haven't played this game, it's wonderful. We all loved the turn-based strategy, strategic combat in this game. The first pass of Fallout actually had very XCOM-y type combat until we got the GURPS license, which I'll also talk about as a big challenge in making this game. Crusader came out while we were making this game. It was one of the first 640, 480 games, was incredibly sharp compared to the 320, 200 games coming out. It was a big influence on us, and one of the reasons that Fallout was made 640, 480 was Crusader. Wasteland, of course, can't say this strongly enough. Fallout is very much a spiritual successor to Wasteland. Almost everybody who played the game or who worked on Fallout had played Wasteland. When we started, I had not played it. So of course, somebody gave me a copy, said, go home this weekend. And I was addicted to it, played it all the time. It's kind of hard playing it on a more recent computer because if you've ever tried playing it, it goes too quickly. You have to put in a speed limiter. Otherwise, you shoot across the screen when you try to play. But this game had everything in it that we wanted to have in Fallout, including no strict morality like the Ultima games had. We wanted the player to be good or evil, do anything he wanted, go anywhere he wanted, and be only really restricted by how skillful he was at playing a game. And then, having mentioned the Ultima series as a game full of morality, it was a big influence on our team. For me especially, this is a picture of Ultima 3. It was the first Ultima game I played. I'd never played 1 or 2, and it just stuck in my head as this is the way an RPG should be made. And while Fallout doesn't have a lot in common with Ultima, it really guided how I thought about making an RPG. Paper and pencil games, GURPS. I'll talk about this later when I talk about legal challenges in making this game. But as many of you know, Fallout was based on GURPS for about the second and part of third year of its development, and then we lost the license, or we stopped using the license. However, GURPS as a generic role-playing system really influenced our game in thinking of classless, skill-based characters, and no longer giving people stereotypes to play in the form of character classes. WizWar, it's a great board game if you haven't played it. It's a great beer and pretzel game. What's fascinating about this game is every time you play it, you shuffle the board pieces together. And we would play this a lot every evening while eating dinner, which we did at work a lot. And we just loved the fact that we could play it every night, and it felt like a completely different game, especially as we made additional cards and just extended the game well past what the original designer had ever intended. And of course, Gamma World, for all of you who played this game, especially when it first came out in 1978.
Gamma World,
it was
holy shit.
not the most balanced RPG, but it was just really fun and it had a really good spirit to it, and we loved the idea of mutations and the wide variety of things you could run into when you're playing the game. As for books, there were 3 big books that influenced us. Canticle for Leibowitz, excellent Hugo-winning sci-fi novel, basically about how people would cherish technology after a war occurred. They were pretty